Extra time.
Welcome back to the Extra Time podcast, one and all. It's me, your host, Patrick van Straaten, and this week I am joined by Henry Hill. Hello, Henry.
Yes, hello. Listen, before Joe gets into it, he's going to have a moan at me. I'm not interested in it. I'm here. I'm ready to film the podcast. I'm excited to talk about players who have been valued at far too much for an average human. So, yeah, whatever. It's a miserable day. I'm not feeling too happy. Let's do this.
Speaking of people who've been overvalued by large organisations, our other guest today is Joe Thomlinson.
There it is.
Presenter of the Saturday Social. Hello, Joe. How are you?
Really good. That was probably your best ever link. And Henry, I don't know how we're 2 minutes into this podcast and your head's already gone. Honestly, you're predicting things that I'm saying. You've lost the plot early doors. I know your landlord's come around, stitch you up, but just relax. Don't worry, mate. There's plenty of time to get into it.
Whatever. Go on then, Pat.
All right. So it's been hinted at there, but today's topic, we decided that we're going to rank the 8 players. I'm calling it 8 players. I don't agree with Wikipedia's ranking here. We're going to rank the 8 players who have cost a club more than £100 million. Okay.
Euros.
There's more if it's 100 million euros. And to be honest with you, the line needed to be drawn somewhere. And I've got to say, my first impressions are that this is a horrific list.
Yes.
The average contribution that these players have made to their club is dreadful. So today we're going to be talking about some serious wastes of money. So what we're going to do is we're going to rank them from 8 to 1, 1 being the best, 8 being the worst. We're going to talk through all our candidates. I'll just run through straight up who we've got so that you know exactly how far down the list we're going. Okay, so we've got Neymar from Barcelona to Paris Saint-Germain, Kylian Mbappe from Monaco to Paris Saint-Germain, Philippe Coutinho from Liverpool to Barcelona, Joao Felix from Benfica to Atletico Madrid, Antoine Griezmann from Atletico Madrid to Barcelona, Jack Grealish from Villa to Man City, Romelu Lukaku from Inter Milan to Chelsea, and finally Ousmane Dembele from Borussia Dortmund to Barcelona.
Wow.
So there are some usual suspects in there, some people who like to throw the cash around and are perhaps not great at it. Guys, rather than going through this kind of one by one, I think we should go through it from 8 to 1. So do you guys have a preference for 8th place? Because I do. It's a very strong preference. I think it's an easy one. Joe, I know that you feel the same way.
If it's anybody other than Antoine Griezmann at 8... don't try it, Henry. Don't tell me you've got somebody other than him at 8.
Philippe Coutinho. 8.
No.
Number 8. More money.
No.
At least Griezmann over the 2 seasons. He scored 35 times. He was played.
He didn't win he won a Copa del Rey.
Oh, come
Henry.
on. That's not entirely. It's not entirely up to him. He joins the club at a time when they were in way more decline than when Coutinho joined them. He was consistently played out of position. They had this miraculous idea that he was going to fill their Neymar-shaped hole on the left side of the attack. They got it completely wrong. He said it. What was it? Setien first or whatever. Even Koeman commented on it that he was being played out of position. Came into the job, then promptly continued to play him out of position. I'm not defending Griezmann too much because I think the whole antics with the video where he said he was staying, was he going? Was a bit ridiculous. And then when he eventually did go, statements like saying that he was on the top table of football alongside Ronaldo and Messi, it's all slightly bollocks, kind of the things that he came out with. I still think he was a quality player, and I just think he got slightly done dirty at Barcelona. I think the fans were completely unreasonable to him. He became the scapegoat of their kind of decline in the latter stages of the Bartomeu presidency. On the contrary, I think Coutinho, for the money they paid, just look how much money they paid for him. 145 million euros. I mean, it's outrageous, that deal. And I don't know how you can't see that as anything other than 8. He had about 6 good months in Barcelona, and he's cost them so much more money. I
would argue that Griezmann only had about 6 good months.
No, he had less than that. I'd say he had less than that.
If that, yeah. And also, let's not forget when he left, Atletico went on to win La Liga. So I just don't understand the logic for one at all behind the Griezmann signing in the first place. At least Coutinho had some logic behind it.
Yes, exactly.
I know that it wasn't the perfect fit, but they were at
least signing a player who... What was the logic behind it then?
Well, they were signing one of Europe's best creative players 100% when he was coming out of Liverpool. Absolutely in smoking form. Griezmann was in clear decline. Didn't fit the system. No. The Barca fans didn't want him. The Atletico fans didn't want him. He talked a load of nonsense. He went back after, what was it? How long did he even stay at Barcelona
2 years.
Before he got sent
2
back?
years. 2
because
years.
He couldn't afford to keep him there and nobody wanted him there. So 2 years. That is an absolute catastrophe from every level. At least there was a plan behind Coutinho, who was actually a good player when he signed.
Coutinho is actually the only guy they've bought in years who was going to play off the left, and there was actually a hole for him to do that. With Griezmann, they were like, right, okay, so
but they didn't even play him there.
We're going to sign this guy. I know, but that was bad management as opposed to the transfer. I didn't really like the transfer at the time. Joe and I both didn't, actually. Chris Hamill was more on the fence about it, or was actually more positive about it. But Griezmann, it's Griezmann's 2 roles. They were like, okay, so centre forward, that's covered. We've got Suarez. Guy cutting in off the right, we've got a guy called Leo Messi playing there. What is Griezmann going to do? Where does he fit into that attack? They tried to get him 2 years earlier, didn't get him. They got him 2 years too late. He was clearly in decline. He didn't win any titles. Whatever you say about Coutinho, was he great? No, but he did win 2 titles.
Oh, come on.
Griezmann won a Copa del Rey. That's nothing.
Yeah.
He's now been sent back to Atletico Madrid. He's just... They didn't even make it past the quarters of the Champions League while they had him there. The only way that Griezmann has a shout for not finishing 8th to me is if Atletico Madrid end up triggering that obligation to buy, which will mean they have to give Barca 40 million euros. But he has been an absolute catastrophe. I mean, Coutinho, I'll grant you, Coutinho is my number 7.
Yeah, so same.
Awful.
But
awful.
I don't think we're putting enough credit behind the fact that Barcelona stuck 120 million on Griezmann, and then Atletico went on to win La Liga by signing Barca's exiting striker for free. I think, honestly, it's such a comedy that it's not even funny. I think you have to have Griezmann at 8 and Coutinho at 7.
I don't think you have to. I don't think you have to.
So you've got the flip reverse, or have you got some other mad order where Griezmann's number 2 for you?
Yeah. No, I don't. Well, I don't think Ousmane Dembele has done much more than him in his time there, really. If you consider sort of the amount of time that he's been at the club.
Another person that's at least won league titles.
Oh,
and a more sensible signing.
Can we stop giving too much credence to this whole one league titles things? The different teams that they're playing in. In my head, this year, if both Coutinho and Griezmann had stayed at Barcelona, then Griezmann would have played a greater impact in the club's success this season. Also, Coutinho,
but he didn't.
He didn't. But I just think Coutinho was also brought in to be like an Iniesta replacement. That was the idea for him there as well, and that was completely misguided as well. I think ultimately Barcelona are the biggest idiots here. They should never should have paid 120 million euros for Griezmann at the age of 28. I think that was just the biggest blunder. I agree that the Coutinho transfer made more sense, but I at least think that Griezmann made a better go of it in his time at the club. And for that reason, like you say, if they do get money back from it, it suddenly does look better. For me, Coutinho is the worst of these lists. It's the ultimate disaster when it comes to the big money transfers, closely followed by Griezmann. Listen, I'm not going to argue about this for ages, but I really don't see why it's so unanimous that Griezmann was a greater success than Coutinho.
I mean, I will say this: both of these players have cost $1 million or more per appearance that they made for the club. Coutinho played 106 games, cost 105 million, so just under $1 million per appearance. Griezmann was only there for 2 seasons and cost 120. But I put it here in the Coutinho section. I don't know why, but I was thinking about this and the Dembele mistake. They made that one. I think that was I understand the rationale. Coutinho didn't really like it, but I understand the rationale. Griezmann made no sense to me at the time, and Griezmann was the last one. And if they hadn't done Griezmann, they might have been able to keep Messi. If 2 years of Griezmann's wages plus the money they spent on him, if they'd kept that cash, they could have kept Messi. And instead, they lost the greatest player of all time, who would have been a one-club man. And yeah, don't get me wrong, there were other things to do with the squad, and there are bigger issues, contributing to their financial decline here. But Griezmann, to me, directly led to Leo Messi leaving Barcelona. And now Griezmann, after 2 years, has gone back to the club that they got him from, who will then probably finish above Barcelona this campaign, or could well do. It's an absolute comedy of errors. So both of these are totally humiliating moves. But the Griezmann one to me is humiliating because it was humiliating before it even happened. Whereas Coutinho has worked out to be humiliating. It could have been fine.
Yeah, I think as well with the Coutinho, just to add a bit of weight to Henry's argument here, I think the loan signing to Bayern Munich, where he actually was quite decent and obviously scored 2, I believe, didn't he, in that what would arguably be Barcelona's most embarrassing ever Champions League result. I think that does also add credence to Henry's point.
Yeah, it does.
But overall, I agree with Pat. I think at least Coutinho had some sort of plan, and Griezmann was the third in the line of the £100 million failures for Barcelona. So the fact they hadn't learnt after previous 2, it makes that even worse. They're both absolute howlers.
Can I just say? I know he's not on this list, but if Eden Hazard, and I thought Eden Hazard was on this list,
Apparently not. I think it was 89 in the end. £89 million.
That is the worst transfer ever, as far as I'm concerned. That is like just flat the worst transfer ever. That would be the worst if I thought it was a contender, just by how embarrassingly injured he's been.
I'd put. I think if we're talking about worst ever, then we've got to start including guys like Kepa in there.
Yeah, fair enough.
Probably Pepe as well. I mean, like there's some honking.
Kepa's won it all, man.
Honking shit in there. Yeah. Like it's I
don't know. How's Hazard not in here, by the way? I thought he was like 150 million or something.
We've just talked about that. Have you been like out of the chat or something?
No, I know you said 8, and I heard you say that he was only 89 million.
Yeah, supposedly.
I'm here to refute that claim.
Look,
I feel like he was way more than that.
If you want to include Eden Hazard in here, and we'll just agree that he goes in at number 9 as the worst one, then that's absolutely fine with me. Like I've got no issue there. But I think we're agreeing that Griezmann goes in at 8. Because also, Henry, I understand your argument that players are playing in different teams, and that is an advantage or disadvantage. But I also do think, and admittedly this is not the player's fault, but when you are paying more than £100 million for a player, it's legitimate to say this player should make us good basically by himself. I know that's an unreasonable thing to ask of a footballer, but that's why you shouldn't spend £100 million on a player, because £100 million should be the difference between a decent side and a great side. It should be. And so when someone's like, we paid 100 mil, but he wasn't really getting the right service, or actually he's better playing up front in a 2 rather than in a 1. I do sort of think, shut the fuck up. Like, he's £100 million. He should be able, like, that should be a player. Like when Real Madrid signed Cristiano Ronaldo, where it was like, that guy's going to succeed whatever you do with him. That's how good he is.
I mean,
should we go to number 6? Should we go to number 6 then, or do you want to keep on debating about that point?
Okay, so we've got Hazard number 9, Griezmann number 8, Coutinho we're agreeing number 7, into number 6. Absolutely racing through it. Number 6, I feel like we've hinted at it. I've got Ousmane Dembele.
I've got Ousmane Dembele.
I have got Ousmane Dembele. Yes, we can all agree on that one.
Could have been anything that you said then.
I was thinking of saying something for a laugh, but
but do you know what? I feel a little bit sorry about the Ousmane Dembele one, because at least there was a relative plan behind it. Yes. Signing one of Europe's most young, exciting talents at the time. When he was coming out of Borussia Dortmund, the hype was huge, and at least there was a thought process about where he could play in the front three, potentially be, the heir to the throne. The derailing of injuries could have been seen to some level, because obviously he had injury problems at Rennes, he had injury problems at Borussia Dortmund. But the level of injury problems he's had, I think you've got to be Nostradamus to be able to see him having more injuries than games played for Barcelona since he signed. I know that it's been an awful time, but he's still only 24. Right. I think players like Griezmann and Coutinho don't have age on their side like Ousmane Dembele.
Yeah, like it's... okay, I don't think this is going to happen, but if Ousmane Dembele signed a new contract and Barcelona were like, right, we've completely changed our medical staff, we've just got a freezer full of horse placenta, and we're ready to absolutely like Felix Magath is turning up and he's bringing loads of cheese, and we're going to sort him out. It's not unthinkable that Ousmane Dembele could recover fitness and go on to be a useful player for them. However, he is probably going to walk for nothing this summer, whereas actually Griezmann, as we said, could recoup them 40 mil. Dembele is probably going to leave for absolutely nothing this year, having achieved absolutely nothing in his time there. But I agree, it's less embarrassing because it's not entirely Barcelona's fault.
Can I just say, though, they splashed over, 105 million euros, some would say it's 120 million euros, on a player that had basically had one prolific season in Germany. He went from Rennes to Dortmund for, I think, something about 28 million, and then well over quadrupled his value in 1 year. I think it is ridiculous that they agreed to pay that price. I think Dortmund completely pulled their pants down on this one because, I mean, we'll touch on this probably with Joao Felix a little bit later. You've got to give players more time to prove that they are what they say they are before you go and spending stupid amounts of money like that. So although, yes, I do agree there was some kind of thought behind it about where he could play, etc., and undoubted talent there, but really he'd had one fairly decent season in the French league and one decent season at Dortmund. And we've seen lots of players have a decent season at Dortmund and gone on to achieve not very much. To go and spend 105 million euros minimum on that player, I think it was really, really silly. And I can't believe that clubs continue to be racing to spend silly money on sort of such young players like this when they haven't really even grown into themselves. And we've seen that with Dembele. He's gone on to have trying to even fill out his frame, fill out his body. He's had tons of issues and problems. What you say, Joe, is completely correct. It is very unfortunate, the issues that he's been struck with. But I even think that the way that this is now currently playing out in the market, Dembele telling the club he won't give in to blackmail, stuff like that, the Spanish Football Federation having to warn Barcelona about the way that they're treating him, Xavi and Laporta ganging up on Dembele, all these factors for me play into it being an absolute shocker of a transfer. And in other ways, I think it's worse than some of the others. I mean, it's just been a complete catastrophe in every aspect. This transfer. There have been moments that have been good. There have been moments that it's good, but from start to finish, things have gone wrong and wrong and wrong. And it's about to have a really bitter, sour end. He's now 24, sitting on the bench for the next 6 months, basically doing a Gareth Bale until his contract's done. I mean, it's a joke. It's a complete joke.
But if last summer, Barcelona had been like, right, we want to sell Griezmann, Coutinho and Dembele, if they'd had that foresight, they could have got more for Dembele than for the other two. Like that is that I think is the case. Just because of his age and
close,
stuff.
Though I honestly think he would have been close because of that injury record.
But no one did.
Yeah, but the other two.
But, okay, Coutinho they'd have got nothing for because otherwise Coutinho would have gone. Like Griezmann,
I think Villa might pay for Coutinho.
I think they might
Coutinho
in the end,
continues,
but I don't think they would have last summer. I think that's because they've had to loan him out again because they can't afford his wages, and it's like, I don't know, man. Like,
but if Villa end up paying 33 million pound clause, I think is in that deal. If they end up paying 30 million for him, and like you say, Griezmann goes for 40 and Dembele goes for 0, then he could be edging up there a little bit more. Get that pulls that does pull him closer to 8th to 7th and 8th, in my opinion.
But that is the difficulty, isn't it? Which is that the rationale on signing Dembele, part of the rationale of signing a young player isn't just we think this guy can improve. It's if he doesn't work out, we can get something back for him.
Yeah.
Whereas they must have known they were never going to get anything back for Griezmann. They must have known that they were probably not going to get much back for Coutinho. At least with Dembele, they probably thought, we can sell him back to the Bundesliga for 40 mil if he's not Barcelona standard. And it's just kind of funny. And it's not, basically the signing isn't great, but the signing has been made to look a lot worse by some bad luck and then loads of other kinds of incompetence. Whereas if those other kinds of incompetence hadn't existed, it would have just been unlucky. They could have sold him on, they could have re-upped his contract and he wouldn't be leaving on a free... there are things they could have done to make this less bad. But because they're Barcelona and they're stupid, they're not capable of doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for 3 Barcelona players to be at 8-7...
I know, man.
It's just such a damning indictment of both the club, the recruitment team, and, the president... before Laporta, Bartomeu. I just think that tenure, I mean, it's got to go down in football history as potentially the worst presidency ever.
Yeah, it's literally it's like one of the most destructive things that anyone could have done to a great club.
Yeah,
I completely agree.
Horrible.
Just quickly, Pat, on Dembele, did you when they bought him, was there a genuine feeling that this guy was Ballon d'Or winning potential? Because this is what his agent has said, And when I look at like what Mbappe's done, when I look at the things that Neymar did, I don't see that with Dembele. I just see a very quick, skillful guy, not a prolific finisher, a game changer, no doubt, but not someone who was ever going to achieve those levels. And I still don't think he's ever going to achieve those levels. Don't get me wrong, a great player, but he's not in the elite category. And like Joe even talks about, at least Coutinho had been balling out for Liverpool for a number of years before they signed him. You know, straight back in the Brazil side, the second that he's up and running again. We've seen that recently once more. I never ever got the sense that Dembele was going to be that guy. He was a very solid player, and I don't doubt that he'd been a great addition had he been fully fit, but he was never ever on the level of the famous Barcelona front threes that we've seen them put together over the years, and I don't think that ever justifies that fee once more.
I don't know, man. I think he was one of if not the outstanding young player in the world, he was one of the outstanding young players in the world at the time. Like, I mean, he was I think he only ended up with 7 goals, 7 assists that season at Dortmund, but he was pretty unplayable. And the advantage of him is because he's so two-footed, it was like, okay, this guy can fit into this team in multiple ways. And back then we were still saying, is Messi going to evolve into the Iniesta role? And they're going to need somebody to play out on the right, or is Messi going to turn into a centre forward and they're going to need a creative guy behind him? And Dembele was putting up creative numbers as a really young player. And actually, while we see lots of young players put up big dribble numbers and put up big shot numbers, we quite rarely see young players put up big creative numbers. But what is weird is that they paid so much. And I mean, there have been some conspiracy theories about that. And it is kind of insane that Dortmund sold Dembele to Barcelona in 2017 for a fee that could have potentially risen to like 130, 140 mil, but then sold Jadon Sancho to the richest club in the richest league in the world last year for 72 million. And I would argue that Sancho definitely had much more of a track record, and also had that added value of being a homegrown player for Man United. Like you could, it's crazy that the fee was almost half as much, and so you do.
But his contract had less time to run.
It did, but I think that's almost balanced out by the fact that you're like, it's Man United coming to us like for this guy, and they could have sold him a year earlier to Man United if they'd wanted to.
But they did try and get more money for him the previous season. I think you have to take these things out of context. In context, like Dembele had been there one season. They didn't really need to let him go. They quoted Barcelona something stupid. Barcelona said yes. They were like, all right, you can have him. You're completely right when you say that Sancho is more successful. But he also agreed. He also stayed on at the club for another year after the pandemic. And I think there is an element of a gentleman's agreement in that. Even if you look at like Pulisic, when it going for like 60 million.
I agree. Yeah.
Look at Pulisic going for 60 million, not really succeeding at Chelsea. I think that they've had to readjust. Transfer fees, like the values of players, are quite a fluid thing, and I think on this particular case with Sancho, it eventually was like, all right, we're going to be, you've given us so much, we're going to be reasonable. You've been here for a number of years. You're going to get your dream move at a pretty. I agree with you. Maybe a less price than what I was expecting at the time, but I still think a fair price given everything that the player had achieved.
But I think that the Dembele thing, like the extra embarrassment, is that I think Barcelona. There are rumours that Barcelona basically didn't negotiate and just went in and like slapped that money down on the table. And the situation was massively exacerbated by the fact that when everyone was starting to get pretty certain that Neymar was leaving, Barcelona continued to kid themselves that he wasn't, and that meant that when he went, they were like, "Oh shit." Everyone knew they had an absolute ton of cash, and they went and like slapped as much of it on the table. Dortmund were like, "Okay, give us like 130 mil," and they were like, "Okay."
But they couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe it.
Okay, but what they could have done, like Barcelona, is been like, you know what, maybe Neymar is gonna leave. Okay, we're gonna try and have a contingency plan in place and not like act in a panicky manner. And so I think there are like elements there that make it. You know, particularly dumb on their part. But yeah, I don't know. I will say that at Dortmund, I thought he was like potentially a world beater. And the sad thing about him is we'll never know what he would have turned into without the injuries. But, you know, I just think there are things that make it really, really difficult. And he went to a club where he was like going to get managers and not really have anyone develop him in the way that Tuchel was developing him at Dortmund. Like, I mean, there are so many things that went wrong with this move. But anyway, Are we agreeing that he's number 6 and moving on to number 5?
Okay. This is where I think it starts to get much more picky. Who are you boys going for at 5?
Oh, don't do that. Don't be like, it's starting to get difficult now. Who have you got? I've got one.
Go on, then.
It's Lukaku at the moment. Romelu Lukaku.
Same. I've got Lukaku as well.
How a move can go this wrong so soon is staggering. As all my closest fans will know, I went on Sky Sports News with David Ornstein to discuss this very transfer back in the summer.
Oh, hello.
Name drop.
Oh, dear. And no, it was, I mean, to be honest, this had to go right. Like, when we look at Joao Felix and Jack Grealish, these are moves where they've got a bit of leeway in it. Although I think the Felix's move's been pretty awful. Lukaku's one had to go right, and it's just for reasons which I can't seem to fathom. It's just not clicking whatsoever. Bear in mind, I think, was it his debut against Arsenal, where he looked so good, and everyone thought this guy's going to score 20, 30 goals this season. Obviously awesome at Inter Milan.
But he was up against Pablo Mari, wasn't he?
Yeah, but still, he was showing like that sort of spin and roll kind of thing that he's been doing, talking about. I think we saw like glimpses of how good this guy could be once more back in the Premier League. And for a move to Chelsea to go wrong twice, I mean, I think you could even add the previous fee they paid for him into this. It's just been so ridiculous. But it's just like, and the whole thing's on social media of him saying if it doesn't fit, then maybe stop for. I mean, that kind of stuff. It's just, oh my God. It's just, I don't know what he's playing at. And this idea that, I think him going out and scoring goals in the Club World Cup is maybe sort of almost even more damning like reflection on his state in the team. That's where he's they're trying to buoy him up in that competition at the moment. So it's just like, I don't know what Chelsea do here. Do they just write off this loss if he leaves? I mean, he keeps talking about going back to Inter as if that's something that he can just easily do. It's not something that easily done. Chelsea have paid a lot of money for him, and he's showing zero professionalism whatsoever. And I just think this is just a shocker, just an absolute shocker. So
yeah,
far.
I think
Inter might be better without him this year.
Yeah, they've been really good.
I'm not sure. Do Inter want him back? I think it's a big question. He worked really well in a Conte system, obviously, against some pretty lethargic defences at times. But I think he's been quite badly exposed so far this season, playing in a system that has to be a little bit more dynamic, in where he has to work a little bit more for the team and less sort of work in the channels, and he has to play a little bit more with his back to goal and get involved in build up and press and counter press. I think Romelu has struggled to get up to pace with the Thomas Tuchel system pretty badly, and I don't know whether that's a damning indictment on him, on whether the club should have recruited him in the first place. It didn't. At the time when it happened, I remember thinking this is a great signing. This is perfect. Last season, one thing you could level very clearly at this Chelsea and Tuchel side was they were not taking big chances. Timo Werner and Kai Havertz consistently missing high quality shots in the box. Romelu Lukaku, great goal scorer, brilliant finisher. Stick him in there and it'll work. And it hasn't worked at all. I think they look better with Havertz playing as a false nine than they do Romelu Lukaku playing as a point man with. And I also thought it would get more out of Timo Werner.
Oh, God.
Maybe my thought process there was it could be a little bit like his time with the Red Bull group when he was playing alongside Poulsen and they were kind of working off each other and he was getting these secondary runs in behind. But that's not worked at all. It feels like it's hindered Timo Werner's progress even more, maybe to the point that he leaves in the summer. I think this has just thrown the balance off entirely at Chelsea. So I'm very close to putting him at 5 as well, but it also feels like, is it too early to have him and Grealish this low?
Well, look, we've got to accept the fact that with Grealish and Lukaku, it is early. That is just the way we've got to, look at it. But with Lukaku, you can say he was 28. He needed to hit the ground running. You basically, at 28, he's played a lot of football, Lukaku. So, and he's not a guy who's going to be a great kind of back to goal link up player when he's 33. Physicality has always been a big part of Lukaku's game. And that is going to diminish as he gets older. So they needed him to make a big impact immediately. And he's got 8 goals in 24 appearances. And what is amazing to me is how genuinely in August, Sam Abasaki and Zach, the resident Chelsea fans on the FD team, were I think we're maybe favourites for the title. I think that we could possibly go and like win the league. And now they've resorted to like trying to take the piss out of like the Man United and Arsenal fans in our group. And you're like, that says so much about what's happened to their season. And a big part of it is that they thought to get that consistency over the course of a year, Lukaku's going to push us up there. But I think he was always a horrible stylistic fit for what they were trying to do. He was never going to work. Like, he's a great player, and I agree that we were kind of like, you know what, maybe they're just going to get so many chances for him, and he'll get on the end of them that he'll score a bunch of goals. And I still think, I'm putting him at 5, but I still think he will end up probably scoring a load of goals for them. But they could have spent the money better. This was a bad idea. I don't think that they'll win the league while he's there. And I just think that, like, the embarrassment factor, when you're spending this much money, the embarrassment factor does become a real thing. Like Coutinho scoring those 2 goals against Barcelona. Okay, Coutinho didn't, like, deny Barcelona the Champions League. They had no shot at winning the Champions League without him scoring those goals. But it's embarrassing. And Lukaku going on, like, you know, giving interviews where he's just like, you know, getting all moist about Inter Milan, and like, you know, they've had to have sit down talks where Tuchel is like, can you stop publicly embarrassing the club, you idiot? Like, it's just so silly. I just don't understand it. Like, and I don't know. I think this is like this first season of Lukaku. They basically now need to go and win the Champions League again for it not to look like an absolute catastrophe.
Yeah, I mean, I will say
it's been so embarrassing.
But if he does win them the Champions League, then this all changes.
Yeah, of course. But that's the case for any of these guys. Like, you know, if Joao Felix like wins the Champions League for Atletico Madrid, he immediately probably goes up to number 1 on this list. But
I don't know.
We'll wait and see if that happens.
I mean, I will say one thing. There seems to be something wrong at Chelsea when it comes to embedding some of these forwards, because we've seen them for a while now. Werner's obviously not worked out at all. Lukaku's not working out. Havertz, he scored the Champions League winning goal. Has he been everything that you're expecting him to be? Probably not so far. Ziyech has his moments every now and then. I guess I know competition in that squad is massive, but I wouldn't say it's been. I think it's been a slightly damning indictment of Chelsea's attacking recruitment, that none of these have really been as prolific as they were perhaps expecting. And I think it's credit to their midfield, really, who have sort of held them up in the last few years. But yeah, just as Joe mentioned, like for Inter to go and get Dzeko for like 99% less of the price, and for him to just sort of pop up with 10 other goals is also a pretty isn't great on Lukaku at all. And it does show that, really, like you say, that system just suited him well. Dzeko, a great finisher, a bit old. I think that was a really smart move from Inter Milan. And yeah, I think they'll be laughing completely. But I mean, should we have a look at number 5? Should we have a look at number 5 or 4, whatever it is?
Number 4.
No, number 4, isn't it?
We're on to number 4.
We had Lukaku at 5. Okay, I've got Joao Felix at 4.
I agree.
Interesting.
Me too.
It's tight, and I feel like it's harsh because he is still only 22, and he has won, you know, La Liga whilst he's been there. But I don't think from the outset this was a good move for the player. First and foremost, I don't think he picked the right club, or Jorge Mendes or whoever advised him to go to Atleti. I think that was probably a poor choice in hindsight now. Just because of the way that Simeone wants to play football, I don't think suits Joao Felix's sort of fairly like liquid style, if for want of a better word. Like he is quite a joy to watch at times, isn't he? And when you have to watch him kind of working hard off the ball and doing things that you don't want Joao Felix to be doing, I'm not sure that is the perfect destination for him. Personally, I also don't think he's been quite as good as I expected him to be when he left Portugal, and even then I wasn't sure how good is this guy. Like it felt like a bit of a crazy fee at the time. It still feels like a bit of a crazy fee now. The club is not a good fit, and he's been okay. Like he's been fine at that club. You know, like I think 35 goal involvements in 98 games is not a big return for a player that's costing 130 million or whatever he ended up costing.
But they do not have a great attack anyway, and he's 22. Like, and they've still got a few years left on his contract. And the numbers have always looked actually pretty decent, like the underlying numbers. And now he's up to kind of over 3 shots a game, getting towards 1.5 key passes. Like, there's a player in there that you could see being great. Plus, they could resell him. Like, I actually, at number 4, I don't know how you guys are going to feel about this. I've got Neymar.
Wow. No, I don't think so. No, that
Not for
number
me.
4. I'd put him in top 2. I think he's top 2. I think.
But
sorry.
No, there's absolutely no way he's in the top 2.
Why not?
Why
not?
Because firstly, he didn't cost 100 million. He cost 200 million. Like, so the standard for him is even higher than everybody else on this list.
He's been amazing. He's been amazing when he's played.
No, he hasn't. No, because the thing is, because you've got to factor in the fact, Henry, that out of 176 league matches since he moved, he's played 80. 80. And they bought him because they were like, right, we want to change the way that we are viewed on the continent. Hasn't happened. They won 3 titles out of 4. They didn't even win every title. Pat. They lost out on a title to Lille, Henry.
No, I'm not. I know that they did. I know they lost out on a title to Lille, but they've become like a.
They got to a Champions League final. That's it. That's all they've done.
They're huge. They like PSG. The
they
PSG that he joined is different. The PSG today is completely different. They are a massive club. They've absolutely smashed it. He was the pillar of them really coming out and saying, we're not just a joke anymore. We're a big club. Like, if you look at all I know you're not going to like this.
But they are.
If you look at all the commercial deals that they've managed to pull off with Jordan, with Nike, their consistent kit, etc. They are. PSG are like a cool club these days, and I think they've managed to like wash off that kind of new money prestige in a way that Man City never really have. I think. PSG. I really think this is. I appreciate that he's been injured for a lot of the time, but he's scored tons of goals. His creative numbers have been mental. He's been fouled an absolute ton. Like he's been bullied off the pitch a lot of the times, so you can't really blame him for that. I think
you get no disagreement about his time on the field. Absolutely no disagreement about his time on the field. He's been great on the field, but
Joao Felix is not necessarily a consistent performer. Like
I'm not saying he is. I'm not saying he is. I just think that like it's a transfer that firstly cost half the price of Neymar, and they could probably sell him on for some money someday, or he might just turn into a really good player. It's totally possible. But Neymar,
it's very possible. I agree.
But Neymar, I think has just not played enough. Like they've got to one Champions League final with him. That's the only thing that's happened.
But that's the first in their history as well. If they were, let's say they'd have won that. If they'd have won that, then we'd have him at 1, would we?
Okay, so if we're factoring in context like that, then Joao Felix playing a part in Atletico winning the league last year is a really big deal as well, because they don't win the league that often. That's their second title under Simeone. It's their second title since the mid-90s.
He didn't really play a part. He didn't even start in their final few matches. He got COVID and he basically disappeared from the squad. They didn't win that title because of Joao Felix. Any success that PSG have had in the Mbappe, Neymar era is partly down to Neymar because of his amazing numbers. I think.
That's maybe true, but I don't think it's definitely true. Like they have been consistently dominant in their league without Neymar. You could argue that one of the things that's prompted so much turnover of managers has been the fact that they've been struggling to basically like put a team together with guys who really don't want to be managed. Like I don't know. I just think that, like if I bought Neymar for £200 million, I'd think we better win the league every year. And I feel like every year we should have a really good shot at the Champions League. And they've had one glimpse of the Champions League, and he hasn't even played half the games for them.
That fee, though, Pat, is so not just about buying the player. It was about buying everything that comes with him. And I think that's why it's been a success. The fact they've even got him to extend his contract, so he's going to be there for a long period of time. The fact that they've managed to win him round to stay in Paris and show to people like Mbappe that you can have a future at this club if you really want to. I think that in itself has made this transfer a huge success in a funny way, considering how bad all the other big money transfers have been. The fact that this one has at least paid off dividends in certain other areas, I agree with you. Maybe haven't won the European title they want, but they're up against some great teams in the Champions League. The Champions League is so tough, and I appreciate that they've lost out in France from time to time. But if you look at the summer transfer market they put together last season, signing some of the best players in the world, Ramos, Donnarumma, etc., that is because of the thing that Neymar started of really elevating this club and taking it to a different stratosphere. And I think for that reason,
I don't actually think that's true.
For that reason, I think the money in a weird way, just on the fact that all the other transfers have been so bad, in a weird way, Neymar's been all right value for money, and certainly better than Joao Felix, who I agree with you deserves more time.
He's cost them like 1.5
But it doesn't
mil
matter
a game,
to PSG.
Henry.
It doesn't matter to Atletico. It matters way more that they decided to spend. It matters way more to Atletico. They decided to spend 126 million euros on a player out of the Portuguese league. It's nonsensical. It's silly. It shouldn't have happened, quite frankly.
Okay, but I still think he might well turn into a great player, and we're like, okay, well they overpaid, but maybe they should have paid like 70 mil for him, and that suddenly looks like not that bad. That's perfectly possible. Like, the thing with Neymar is I just think, like, yeah, you can make the argument about, like, them becoming a cool club, but I think they might well have become a cool club just with Mbappe. And I don't think they signed those players last year because Neymar made them a cool club. I think they signed those players last year because they finally reached a Champions League final, and also because they had the money to sign them. Like, last summer, nobody had any money. PSG were one of about 3 clubs around Europe who actually had some cash to give these players huge contracts, and they overpaid for them. Wijnaldum hasn't been very good for them. Like, I mean, Messi, they were literally the only club aside from Man City who could afford to do it, and we don't know if they could afford to do it. No, but it's like, it makes the fact that, like, they just got him because they could afford him. They didn't get him because, like, Neymar made them such an attractive club.
It's a bit more complex than that. But I certainly think that the Neymar impact at PSG has been huge, and I think he's achieved more in what time he's put together on the pitch than what Joao Felix has done. Though no discredit to Joao Felix, I agree with you. He could become a truly great player.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue Neymar has not achieved very much at all. But I'm okay. I'm definitely okay with Felix in at number 4 because he was my number 3. So I don't really care. So Felix,
yeah, it's tight. I would probably just err towards. I might even have Neymar at 2.
Yeah, me too.
I think that's wild. Okay, let's move on to number 3 then. Who
2,
have you guys
3
got at 3?
I would probably. This is where I'd have Grealish, and I'll be honest with you. I think it's only because he's not been there long. Like, I know we've put Lukaku really low, but I feel like Grealish's impact on this Manchester City team has been fairly minimal at this stage, and he could well go on to become sensational. And generally, wingers in a Pep Guardiola system, as we know, historically at Manchester City, have taken a season to embed the likes of Sterling, the likes of Riyad Mahrez, the likes of Leroy Sané. So it's very possible next season Grealish just becomes an absolute brute and is just unplayable. But I think at the moment, I don't think he's had much of an impact on this Manchester City side. I think the fact that you're seeing Raheem Sterling hitting top gear now and Jack Grealish kind of sliding into a bench role sums that up. I know that he's out injured at the moment, but I can see towards the back end of the season Sterling playing a lot more minutes than Jack Grealish. So I can't. It's hard to rate him, isn't it? It's hard to rate him comparatively to anyone else on this list.
The one thing I'll say about that is that, like, under Pep more than under any other coach, I think being benched is just par for the course. Like, basically everybody spends so much time on the bench under Pep. Like, he always mixes and matches. And, like, you know, we've already talked about Sterling this season potentially leaving. We've always talked about Foden needing more minutes. Riyad Mahrez barely gets any notice despite having been arguably their best player this season. I mean, I think Grealish... I mean, it is hard because, like, yeah, he hasn't really done much. But he is playing regularly for a side which is far and away the best in the country, probably the best in Europe. He's going to win the league. He might well win the Champions League. And that, to me, makes...
I agree, but he hasn't played a huge role in any of them, and he did cost £40 million more than any other City signing.
I think his role has been, like, undervalued, though. Like, yes, he's not contributing enough goals. That's definitely true. But I do think part of that is, like, just bad finishing that we'd expect to come round. And it's been true of everyone in that side at some point, including and especially Gabriel Jesus and Raheem Sterling.
It is easier for him, though, because on the basis that City have so many players that can step up. We see Bernardo Silva drift in and out of being elite and people having question marks about him. It is easier for him because if it's not like if he's not doing well, the club's not going to do well. They can give him that time to flourish. And I think that maybe Felix, there was more expectation for him to be better. I make a greater impact.
Yeah, but he's also playing in quite a bad Atletico Madrid side, who I think are really losing their way under Simeone. And, like, you know, I think this kind of goes for the others as well. Like when Mbappe and Neymar miss games in the league, PSG still absolutely crush sides generally, and certainly they did before the last couple of years when Di Maria has started to slow down. So it's hard, isn't it, to say like, well, this guy should have made this team way, way, way better, like I was saying before. But also, this guy didn't really have much support doing it, and he was 19 at the time, coming to a much bigger league. Like I would say that Atletico Madrid, when they signed Felix, kind of baked into that deal, and I think this is backed up by the fact they gave him a 7-year contract. Look, there might be 3 or 4 years here where he's like not that good. Like that, I think they understood that. Whereas I think, with
although they do love to hand contracts like that out, don't they?
They do. But like with Lukaku, we were like, that guy's got a bang. Like he has to do it now. If he doesn't, you never get anything. So, man, I don't know. I think Grealish is a contender for number 1.
Not ahead of Mbappe, Pat. Surely.
Okay. But Mbappe's going to leave for nothing.
Yeah, the deal has ended a stinker for PSG. But if we're ranking the players in terms of like quality and impact, I think.
Well, let's settle 3 first. Have you got Grealish at 3 as well?
Yes,
I've got Grealish at 3. Yeah, Felix at 4, Grealish at 3.
If you've both got Grealish
Neymar
at 3,
2, Mbappe at 1.
Okay, and Henry?
Yeah, I've got Mbappe 1, Neymar 2, Grealish 3. Grealish and Felix 4. So yeah,
but a huge asterisk next to Grealish because you can't tell. It's just too early.
Yeah, but I think we have to just like take that. We just have to go with it. Like, and to me, Grealish is like they are gonna win the league by miles. And regardless of what we say about his goal and assist numbers, like I'm kind of intrigued why people like think he's been so impactless, because like when I see him in games, like. He is just like blowing past people, and he's the league leader. In fact, he's the continent leader by miles at carrying the ball into the box. And like, I know that this isn't as like, there's something here where we all still feel like that doesn't count as much as goals and assists. And I get why that is. But when he's been on the field, like they've been without De Bruyne for long stretches of the season. And yet they've just looked as dominant as they've ever been. They've been without a recognised striker, and they've looked as dominant as they've ever been. And I think that
but I think that's because I think the reason for that is because they like around this stage last year they were on that 15-game unbeaten run, weren't they? And they're probably going to do it again. And they didn't have Grealish, and they didn't really have a recognised striker, and they were still doing this. So it's kind of, I feel like
I think they're better this season.
It's taken away from individuals because of. I think it's taken away from individuals because of the quality of the management.
But I also think, to a certain degree, by me ranking Grealish high, it's because I think they got him. They got a homegrown player at his peak. They've got a good few years in him, and he's got resale value if they won it. They are favourites for the league, despite not getting a striker in the summer. They're favourites for the Champions League. And I just think he will end up being amazing for them. That's basically it.
All right, but you can't deny that Mbappe's been amazing for PSG. I get he's going to leave for free, but 230 goal and assists in 202 games. He's become like a World Cup winner since he's been with them.
That's got nothing to do with it.
I know it does. It has everything to do with it. It's them. It's the pride of owning one of the great players of our time, and he's done that at PSG. We will look back at these years.
That's ludicrous.
We'll look back at these years and say Mbappe was unplayable, and I think that's completely true. I do feel sorry for PSG.
No, they won't. They'll look back at these years and be like, we lost him just as he was hitting his peak to another big club. If he stays on...
But what can they do about that? If a player wants to leave for free, then he's going to leave for free.
Well, yeah, but that's part of like the thing. Like, that's one of the reasons that you don't pay like such a huge amount for a player if you think he's going to leave for free, or you re-up the contract. Like, don't get me wrong, Mbappe's been absolutely incredible for them, and the fact that they managed to get him when everyone wanted him was amazing. And he basically couldn't have been better, except he could have played more, and he could have won the Champions League, and he could have won 4 out of 4 league titles. Those would have been good things for him to do. But he's undeniably a better transfer than Neymar. He's better in every conceivable way. However, he's going to walk for nothing, and he's going to make a rival much, much better. And that's my objection. Like, if they announced tonight that Mbappe had signed a new contract, I'd agree. Like, there's absolutely no doubt he'd be number 1 by such a huge margin, it wouldn't even be worth talking about. But the fact that he could leave for free, and they have plugged over £250 million into him, and also, I know, Henry, you could say like, okay, well, he's like turned them into more of a commercial like entity, but losing him is a huge commercial loss as well. And he's going to go and do, but he's going to go do that to another club. What do you mean? You said like, oh, they get so much credit for like Neymar gets so much credit for helping turn them into like such an enormous presence on the football scene. But like, how do they not?
I think you said this, Pat. Them receiving a transfer fee doesn't matter for him necessarily. If they wanted to do that, they'd have done it last season. I think the fact they've got another year out of him, he's continued to be brilliant for them. We don't know how well they could do in the Champions League. I think it looks quite clear that the appointment of Pochettino was a bit of a problem. It just looks like Leonardo seems to be the general problem floating through PSG. This kind of cyclical bad taste in the air that he seems to leave at various points at the times of PSG. Mm-hmm. I appreciate that he's going to leave for free, but if you're going to pay £130 million for a player, you expect them to give everything to the club, and you cannot deny by the numbers that Mbappe has put up that he's given everything. He couldn't have done any better for them. He's been.
I don't know. I don't think that performance, in very much the same way you were saying about Ousmane Dembele, performance in Ligue 1 does not blow my mind. I think that he needed to do more than that there. Or rather, I think the transfer needed to be worth more than that there. And I understand what you're saying, that they don't need the fee necessarily, but they also need to not strengthen rivals for nothing. Like, that's the thing. If he goes to Real Madrid for absolutely no money, Real Madrid are going to be contenders for everything again without having had to pay a fee, which actually, if they'd had to pay a fee, they probably wouldn't have been able to. So that is a big problem. Like, it's not necessarily about them getting the money so much as it's about them taking that money from a rival. Whereas Real Madrid can go and sign him this summer and still have, the 200 mil or whatever they would have had to pay to get Mbappe if he had a long contract. They can go and spend that on other guys and rejuvenate their squad. And suddenly PSG might start getting left behind. Like, that is a big issue.
So if they'd have accepted the €200 million bid on deadline day from Madrid last summer that was reported, Pat, for you, this would be
number one,
miles away. Because they've had these offers on the table. Yeah,
because they'd have got everything that Henry's been talking about out of Mbappe, but they'd have also made a profit. They'd have essentially had Mbappe, turn them into more of a commercial entity, win them these titles, be incredible for them, and they'd have done it while turning a profit.
So they've gambled €200 million on winning the Champions League this year. They believe that Mbappe can win the Champions League, which they're not going to do. But if they do win it, it's hypothetical, and we've been talking about hypotheticals the last 10. If they do win it, do you agree that he's far and away clear number one?
Yeah, I think so. If he were to win the Champions League for them, if he'd got a big fee for them, or he were to win the Champions League for them, then I think there's much more. Then I think it's much easier to put him number one. But I'm not necessarily objecting to him being number one. I wrote him down number one initially on my list. It's just that I think we're acting like it's been just this incredible success, and that to say anything about this transfer maybe being ill-judged or anything about it being kind of not that great is ludicrous. And I think it's been handled moronically.
But to the same extent, you could argue that Grealish, they paid £100 million for a winger. If he doesn't win the Champions League with under this Pep Guardiola system, then you could suggest that has been a failure, given that Pep probably could have signed a £50-60 million winger and got very exceptional output, because the system is much more than the individuals within it at that Manchester City side.
Yeah, though you could argue that they might have just turned around and spent that money on Harry Kane, and I think that they would have been worse. I think that would have been a really stupid thing to do. So
you think they'd have been worse with Kane than with Grealish?
Probably this season, but definitely in the long term. If we're looking at City next season and the season after, I think that Kane would have been a much worse investment than Grealish. So I know what you're saying, but they were probably just going to spend 100 mil on someone, and I think that Grealish, as it goes, is about as well as they could have done. He's homegrown. He was one of the best players in the league last season. He's a great age. I don't know. I think that he made sense in every possible way.
Yeah, I think for Mbappe, another reason that I've got him one is that he has done these things Whereas Grealish's hypotheticals could do these things, do these things if he does these things. Whereas like I think Mbappe, and that's partially the reason that I've got Neymar up there. I know that he hasn't won the Champions League, but has been able to do these things. I also feel a little bit dark on putting Lukaku so low, but because he hasn't played that many games, and if next season he leads them to the title and clicks, then we're going to look like a bunch of muds. Do you know what I mean? But for me, it's got to be Mbappe.
But that's fine. Like I accept that on Lukaku and Grealish we might look silly, and like we've got Grealish in at number 3 here. If he wins the Champions League at the end of the season, then like what do we say? Like if it's kind of one of those difficult things. Like your team could win the Champions League without you playing a major role. Like Chelsea could win the Champions League playing Havertz up front. Does that make Lukaku a better signing? Like it's really difficult to say, right? Like Felix, if like at the end of the season Atletico Madrid are able to, like, say they sell him to Man City for like 65 mil, then we'd be like, okay, like maybe that was kind of fine then. Like it wasn't great, but it's kind of okay.
What's your final order, Pat?
Go on.
What have you gone for?
My personal order. I didn't do a 1 and 2, but I had Mbappe there more often. Like, but I basically just left it open. Then Grealish, then Felix, then Neymar, then Lukaku, Dembele, Coutinho, Griezmann, and if we're including him, Eden Hazard. Obviously, the worst that there's ever been.
Wow.
I've gone Mbappe 1, Neymar 2, Grealish with a big asterisk at 3, Felix, Lukaku, Coutinho, Dembele, Griezmann.
Oh,
hang on, what? You had Coutinho as better than Dembele?
Sorry, Coutinho, Dembele. Yeah, Coutinho at 7. Sorry,
okay.
Not at 6.
Right. Yeah, I think you and Henry have identical orders.
No.
No,
because he had Coutinho, didn't he?
Yeah,
Coutinho at 2.
Same top 4 as you, and then what is it? Lukaku. Then I'm probably going to go Griezmann, Coutinho. No, Lukaku, Griezmann, Dembele, Coutinho, and then
Griezmann at 6.
Griezmann at 6.
I think that is less controversial than putting Neymar at 4 or 5, or whatever you put him at.
I've got to say, when I was doing this list, I was like, well, at least one thing's easy, and that's that Griezmann's the worst.
Well, I thought at least one thing's easy. Neymar's in the top 2. I thought that was pretty set in stone. I will say I've enjoyed this. It's nice to do something which where we all completely disagree, and I suppose in the comments we'll see what people go for. But yeah, I've enjoyed the fact that we don't all just think the same on this one.
I also do just think though that like literally any list you choose, any order you choose here is potentially very embarrassing. Like as Joe says, Lukaku could just like pick up in the back half of the season, or Mbappe could sign a new contract, or Dembele could sign a new contract, or Griezmann could go to Atleti for 40 mil, or Felix could just like come into form and turn into a superstar over the next 2 years. Like there are so many things here that can make us look like absolute which is kind of perfect. Like that's the ideal outcome, I think, for one of these podcasts.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, guys. Is there anything that you'd like to plug before you go? I'll start with you, Henry.
Oh, well, if you like this, why don't you go watch our Why You Should Never Spend £100 million on a Player explained, because the moral of the story is you should never spend stupid money on players. I think that's my takeaway from this all. Otherwise, we've got loads of other explains and good videos out there to enjoy.
Cool. Joe, you got anything to plug?
Doesn't get better than that, does it? £100 million explained. Go and watch that. I agree with Hennes.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, guys. And thank you to you at home for joining us, either as a podcast or as a video. Make sure that you subscribe to Football Daily Podcast on YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast using your favourite app. And we will catch you next time. As Henry says, let us know what you thought of our list in the comments. See you later.